Hey, welcome to the Wednesday evening broadcast from the office of Dr. Michael Passmore in downtown San Antonio. I'm delighted to be able to share with you today. I've been picking up a few items lately off of my desk or work table and sharing them with you. Today I have one of them that I've had for quite a while. This is a box someone gave me. It's a box with a switch on the top of it. And you can take this switch and you flip it. The other side of the box opens up and a little lever comes out and turns the box off. The sole purpose of this box is to turn itself off. It whirs and buzzes just a little bit and then flips up and turns itself off. I know a lot of people who are tempted to just turn things off sometimes, even in church, even among church people. Sometimes we find friends who completely misuse a scripture verse. I'm going to be talking about one of those scripture verses today, probably the most misused throughout my ministry. It's from Romans, the 8th chapter, verse 28. I can read it to you. We know in everything God works for good with those who love God, who are called according to God's purposes. This is a verse. It is not a passage of Scripture. Many times we read a verse and commit it to memory, but we don't hold it in the context of the entire passage. Such has been the nature of this one verse. We know in everything God works for good. We're in the middle of COVID-19. Some people say in everything God works for good. God brought us this virus. Some off-balance dude drives his truck into a crowd of people in London or Paris or Germany or even in the United States, or they open fire at a non-social distancing group of folk in a concert, or someone goes berserk with a knife nowadays. All things work for good. It has its cousins in the quotes, the platitudes of people well-intended in their faith. Everything happens for a reason, someone tells me. God caused all things to happen for a good reason. God must be testing you for a reason. Sometimes I think like I must be related to Job with his friends who are meant to encourage, just discouraging him every step of the way. Someone said once, things don't happen to you, they happen for you. Well, I'm ready for the lottery ticket thing to work for me, perhaps. I wonder how often we go back and forth in our mind, wondering in frustration, what is happening? Is all suffering God's will? Does God really orchestrate pain and tragedy? Did God cause an alligator in Orlando to attack that little girl? Did God cause somebody to shoot up a concert with multiple guns? Or did God cause the off-balance young man to go through the halls of Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting and killing? I can remember as a young guy going to a funeral of an elderly fellow who had had a heart attack, a good member of the church, and family members from all over the country were there, and I took my seat on the sofa beside another woman who was there, and she recognized me as the guy who had done the service, and she said, you know, I'm not much a fan of ministers. Well, that's a way to warm up a conversation with a young clergy person, and so I started off by saying that I'm not a fan of all clergy persons either. I'm not a fan of all ministers. Sometimes some of my friends say and do dumb things, and sometimes I say and do dumb things. Tell me, what made you decide that you don't like ministers? And she told a quick story. She was 16 or 17 years old. Her mother suffered, was abandoned, died of cancer. She was just a young teen. I cannot imagine that. And then some of her well-intending Christian friends came up to her and said, God intended this. Everything happens for a reason. You need to trust God and get over it. She said, I loved my mother very much. We were very, very close. I tried to apologize for her friends' insensitive remarks. I tried to understand and explain what was going on, but the spiritual damage was done. Good intended words? Sure. Trying to comfort a friend? Okay. Platitudes delivered. Damage done. Can you blame her for not liking people of religious faith? She said, I decided not to have anything to do with God or religion or church. But here she was sitting next to me at the funeral of a relative. I know that the God I know would not plot and plan suffering and tragedy. I'm convinced that it is the foolishness of other people, or sometimes a bad choice. And sometimes I just have to acknowledge that we live in an evil and imperfect world. I know that the same God that was personified in Jesus Christ used to put children on his knee, and I can't imagine him then poisoning them with cancer, kill young ones in car accidents, wipe out families in tornadoes and earthquakes. In Luke chapter 13, 18 men had died in a construction accident. Jesus answered this question like this. He said, do you think those 18 that died when the Tower of Siloam fell on them were more guilty than all others in Jerusalem? Jesus said, no. He also said it rains on the just and the unjust. COVID-19 has been slowly meandering its way through our country, decimating some places, leaving some relatively untouched. I know that many of you are suffering. Even it seems that your prayers are not coming out clearly. Read in the context this 8th chapter of Romans. Hear about people praying and trying to find words that are beyond their ability. God knows what you need. Life is crazy. And sometimes we forget that we're very, very close, even when we are suffering, to the God who is reaching out to touch and embrace us. It is my hope and your prayer that you will find your strength in this faith.